Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Sunday School Dropouts podcast. We are so excited that you are with us today and very excited for our guest today.
Yes.
Would you like to tell everyone who the guest is, Laura?
Yeah, I'm thrilled because today we're going to be talking to Phil Drysdale, which I have joked as the founding father of the Deconstruction, which is not true. We know this. However, Phil has been around the interwebs and social media for many years doing phenomenal work on deconstruction and providing resources and support to so many people, myself included. So I'm thrilled because he is going to be talking to us today about the difference between deconstruction, deconversion, and being dechurched, as well as doing a deep dive into what deconstruction is, which is awesome because he's got some great research to share with us. And I think everybody's going to love this conversation. I know I did.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. Also, on a lighter note, this is really interesting. Through the years, I've actually received more than one DM from folks who are astounded that we were not the same person, he and I. I don't know why.
Oh, really?
There was this joke for a while there that was like, wait, Andrew, Deconstruct Everything, Phil Drysdale. Wait, you guys aren't? No, you're two different accounts. So for those of you who are watching the video content version of this podcast, you will in fact get to see us side by side and realize we are not in fact the same person.
That's so good. Yeah. You've been masking as Phil for the last couple of years and putting on different accents and all the things.
Yes.
I love it. I
mean, not a bad guy to be mistaken for. Don't get me wrong.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, you will actually. I guess we're still not in the same room, virtually speaking.
True.
Here, of course, but kind of. So,
yeah, we could have used AI somehow to manipulate it so that you are in the UK as well as in the US, and it'll be great. Yeah, I love it. But I'm excited because we're getting back to our Touchstone series, which for those of you who haven't caught some of the episodes, we do some episodes that are just kind of the basics, like the foundation. What is religious trauma and the nervous system and deconstruction and spiritual abuse? And we took a little bit of a break for our religious trauma and politics segment or a mini series. So now we're going to be finishing that up. We've got, religious trauma and the holidays coming up, and then we're going to get into some great episodes. But on that note, we are going to be doing a couple episodes on religious trauma and the holidays, and we would love to hear questions from you. What are the things you want to know? What are the things that you're not so excited about, the things you're anticipating? We want to know from you what those questions are. And if you submit them, we will answer them on the air. So the best way to do that is to go to our Instagram, Sunday School Dropouts Pod, and you can either DM us or you can leave. We're going to put a question box up several times on our Instagram stories, and you can leave the question there. And we're going to answer all of those in a couple episodes, specifically around religious trauma and the holidays. So that should be good.
We recognize that some of the topics we discuss in any episode may bring up feelings, emotions, and triggers that may require more processing or be too much to handle right now. Please always feel free to skip any episode or parts of episodes and come back if and when you are ready. Our goal is to help you trust your own body and lived experience, so take what you need and leave what you don't.
Okay, Andrew, it is time to pray, and I think we have a lot to pray about. I'm just kidding. Maybe lament is a better way to say. This is the segment where we normally are snarky and sarcastic, talking about the current events, what's going on in deconstruction land, all that, and I think we will be that. But we felt like it was probably appropriate to talk a little bit about the elections because this is the first episode post-elections that the two of us have been on together. And we had this whole big series on religious trauma and politics, and we felt like, we probably need to wrap it up by sharing some reflection thoughts since we're now a couple weeks out from the election. And yeah, just wanted to check in and see how people are doing. Andrew, I'm curious to know how you're doing. What's life been like post-elections?
The first word that comes to mind is kind of surreal, actually. on a personal level, like I'm doing okay. I'm, just taking care of myself, and I also was in the midst of a move. So there's been some other logistical things kind of posing as like a distraction, I suppose. But definitely it's been like a heavy focal point in that this is the context and the content that I'm working with most of my clients. Maybe not everyone, but this is a big, big, big thing, big piece of what we're just processing, really. Someone else said it better than I would be able to say it, but they said this election, it felt like compared to like 8 years ago, they said it's less shocking, but it feels a lot heavier.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still have such a visceral memory of how I felt after the 2016 elections, also how I felt after the 2020 election. And I will say that the day after the elections this year, I felt a lot of numbness. Like in some ways I really wasn't surprised. In other ways I was like just horrified. And also just completely numb. And I think that was my body's response to just like the overwhelm of what might this mean. I think in particular, I have a lot of fears around the potential of Project 2025 being enacted, or even just portions of that. I know we talked a bit about that a couple episodes ago with Jeremiah and Julia from the Sex Evangelicals, and right. And what we talked about was just like such a small sliver of what that document is, and to know that there's even so much more in there. And so I think that I just kind of went into like a numb shock the full day after. It was really, really difficult. Just kind of letting it sink in and trying to make sense of everything, and just really like taking care of myself to not spin into like a panic place.
I think that's where a lot of folks are right now. I think that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I mean, it's like I'm not particularly surprised, and I don't mean that to sound overly negative, but I just knowing how the voter base was, how fervent and united they seemed to be on the right. It does not surprise me that this happened, because the fact of the matter is, the other side of it, I mean, there's been kind of some division and fighting going on for various reasons for the last 6 months, and so it's not actually really all that surprising, I think. And
right.
But yeah, I mean, one thing I'm always talking about is in the context of therapy and coaching, and it's like, definitely like take the space to vent, take the space to like, we don't have to pretend that this isn't really concerning and really heavy. And also like there's still glimmers too. Like, was it Missouri? I think, an incredibly red state that like guaranteed abortion access or something. I mean, like, when I read that, I'm like, Missouri, did you get the state right? Are you really Missouri? And I mean, that's just one example. Like, there were a few other victories that, I mean, the thing that tells me it's like, we talked about the importance leading up to the election, the importance of local elections, local community organizing. And to me, that's, I mean, it's like a drop in the bucket, I realize, but I mean, also, that's Missouri. That's not the kind of place that you win those types of fights, and yet we did. And so that's things like that, I definitely am holding on to moving forward. Right. It's like, we can still win fights that really matter in places that you wouldn't think that we would be winning them, and yet, that's what community organizing and local elections and stuff can do. So,
yeah. I think it's so necessary to find the glimmers, or to find the moments of hope like that. And, since Roe v. Wade was overturned, nearly, I think, every single ballot initiative except for one, and that was this election cycle in Florida, every single ballot initiative has been in favor of abortion healthcare rights. And I find that to be extremely hopeful. And I don't think it's any small thing. I think that we should be able to take the hopes and take the wins where we can, and to know that those are life-saving measures for many people. And I am hopeful that those sorts of legislative moves can become more common, on a state-to-state basis. And so it's really, like you said, it's like we have to let ourselves feel the grief, but we have to let ourselves feel everything, right? So to we talked about that idea of like diving down into the depths and coming back up for air. Like Missouri is coming back up for air, right? Like we're coming back up for air with some of that legislation, but we're coming up for air with like the first openly trans woman. Is it in the Senate? I think in the United States Senate. Like that's a breath of fresh air, where we're seeing diversity, things like that, and so. Yeah, it's complex. All of this is really complex. And I used to, well, I still sometimes joke that like, when you're in a relationship or you're starting to date somebody and you're in that like limbo phase of like, do we like really like each other? Are we together? Are we dating other people? And you're like kind of waiting to figure out an answer. Like that is hell. That part, that limbo stage is hell. If hell exists, it's that. And I kind of feel like that's the stage that we're in a little bit right now, is this like limbo stage of like, we're not really sure what is going to happen. We know what's been proposed. We know different things that are being said, but we don't actually know what that's going to look like. And I think that sometimes that is the scariest part, because all we can do then is run with our imagination and run with what we know has been said, and then spell out worst case scenarios. But that creates a lot of stress and anxiety. And so I wish there was like a simple answer of like, oh, just don't worry until the transition of power happens. But it's like, no, I mean, it makes sense that there's a lot of people that are worried, and I can really empathize.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's like on the one hand, like, don't worry about things you can't control yet, but also it's like, but at the same time, it's like, I do literally know folks who, for example, live in Tennessee and are relocating to, interestingly enough, to Minnesota. But anyway, I just realized we're in Tennessee, and then back to where you're from. But still, like, but the point being, like, folks that are like, I don't know how safe it will be for me and my family and people I love to stay in this state. We're going to relocate to a state that I know at least it's going to be safe and have protections legislated and in place.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've thought about for sure. I'm curious to know, like, in your work with clients, has there been any like themes that have come up, things that people are struggling through specifically, that, and the reason I ask, I have something that I thought of, is because I think one of the most important things is for people to know that they're not alone. That's, as I've been on social media in the days and whatnot since the election, like just being able to speak to some of these unique pieces, even within religious trauma and politics, and people going, okay, it's so nice to know that I'm not the only one whose religious trauma is like super duper activated at this point, or it's nice to know that it's okay to grieve and it's okay to not be okay. So I wonder if maybe that's where we can kind of like, wrap up our prayer request time, is just kind of helping to normalize some of this and to say like, there's a lot of people going through this. And so if you are too, like that's okay. It's normal, and there's support available.
I think for a lot of people, because, so even 8 years ago, even 4 years ago, there were a lot of instances where family members and maybe even friends from the church in our past lives, so to speak, voted differently than what we did. There's that small sliver of, 8 years ago, I mean, in their defense, they didn't know that Roe v. Wade would actually be gotten rid of. Now it's like, we know that they mean business. They can and they will be overturning things like that. What I'm hearing consistently from quite a few folks, both personally and professionally, is just this utter sense of betrayal from family members who, I mean, like, that know what this means, like, to me as a person. Like, they know, for example, that I'm a survivor of sexual assault. They know that this was the thing. They knew that. They knew all of that, and then they still, eyes wide open, went and voted for this candidate again, knowing full well what he's already done and what he's going to continue to try to do. So I think betrayal is the biggest piece that I'm hearing. That's like a common denominator that I'm hearing from a lot of folks. From folks who said that I love you while I vote for someone who's going to harm you.
Mm-hmm. That, we didn't obviously compare notes before this, but that was exactly what I was thinking too, was this theme of betrayal. I've had so many clients and then even friends and other colleagues say things like, I grew up in this faith background that taught these specific values. And so in my mind, there's no way that my dad or my mom or my siblings or my grandparents or whatever could vote for somebody who's standing for some of these things. And then to find out that indeed they did, maybe not once, not twice, but maybe even 3 times, whether they have a history or they are the marginalized one or whatever, the fact remains that it went against a lot of their spiritual and faith-based principles. And so, that feeling of betrayal, maybe even blindsidedness of like, how could this happen? What was my faith real? Was your faith real? Like, did any of that matter? Even like they're such, intense questions. And I'm hearing them from so many clients, that sense of betrayal that, I don't know if I can trust family members. I don't know if I can trust my past. I don't know if I can trust aspects of my religion of origin. I'm questioning everything. And there's a heaviness to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. That's what I'm definitely seeing as well.
Yeah. So, I just want to name the fact that if that's you are not alone. I know that knowing that doesn't take away the pain or the hurt or the frustration or confusion. But I think when we know that we're not in isolation, that connectedness, that empathy can be something that acts as a bit of a salve to a wound that feels really gaping. And I also just want to say too, that I think about, I've had the opportunity to connect with many of the practitioners at the Center for Trauma Resolution and Recovery who are going through their own grieving process, but also supporting clients through this. And I know like the heart and the passion that so many of them have, all of them have, to be working with people that are in this space of just needing some extra support, needing to know they're not alone, needing to know they're not crazy. And so if that's you, I would just, I'll make sure that the link is in the show notes. I would just encourage people, if that is something that might be helpful to you, to reach out to a practitioner, set up a free inquiry call, consider working with somebody. There's sliding scales available. There's, people that are practicing all sorts of different intersections of specialties. And I just want people to know that there is support available if they are feeling alone, if they're feeling like they need additional help.
Yeah, I feel like we have so many great practitioners at CTR.
Yeah.
And so definitely reach out if that sounds like something that or if someone that could use that resource. The initial inquiry calls that you can set up with any of us are completely free. So it doesn't hurt to reach out.
Today, we are jumping back into our touchstone topic episodes with a conversation that is foundational for people who are leaving high control religion, fundamentalism, and cults. We are talking all about faith deconstruction, and we're joined today by someone who has been in the religious deconstruction space since the beginning. We're talking about Phil Drysdale. Phil has spent the last 15 years making space for people to resolve their religious trauma and explore life post-deconstruction. Through his creation of the Deconstruction Network, he's helped people deconstructing connect with one another from their local areas. For the last 5 years, Phil has partnered with a research organization in order to research those who identify as deconstructing to try to help people understand the phenomenon and bring clarity to what exactly this group looks like, and often more importantly, what they don't look like. He is also a coach, guide, and companion for those who are deconstructing as he helps them resolve their religious trauma and explore what life looks like on the other side. We are so excited to have Phil on our episode today.
Welcome, Phil. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Important question. Are you a Sunday school dropout?
I don't know if I've been called that before, but I imagine that I would probably fall into that category, yes.
I love it. I love it. Awesome.
Well, it's funny. I mean, me being a former Seventh-day Adventist myself, it's kind of like technically I'm a Sabbath school dropout, but it's kind of like, so I've never actually used that term before until I did this podcast myself. But yeah, well, it's great to have you on. I'm excited to just, get right into it. I was curious if you could just start by just sharing with us a little bit of your own personal history of growing up in religion and kind of what led you to Deconstruction.
Sure. So I'm the son of pastors. Grew up in quite a kind of regular I guess it'd probably fall into fairly normative evangelical world back when I grew up. What has become evangelicalism now has probably evolved a little bit. But yeah, kind of grew up in Christianity, but not particularly that fussed about it. And actually only in my teen years really started to engage with it. And from there, I kind of just spiraled into a very fundamental place. Ended up moving to the States. So I'm from Scotland. You'll never tell from my accent. Moved to the States, joined a big Bible college there, got really involved in that, then got involved in their ministry, traveled all over the world, did a lot of stuff. I was part of a network that kind of oversaw thousands and thousands of churches, and I helped pastor the churches' pastoral teams and helping them replicate the system that was there. And so a whole thing. And so I traveled all over the world, and then I left that and I just started traveling independently. I wrote blogs, I did lots of things. My big fame was that I was number one on Christianity for iTunes for 4 weeks. It was me, Joel Osteen, Joseph Prince, and I'm I'm on top. Yes. So I for a little week, 4 weeks. I was there. I was in the mix. I never had the $10,000 like these guys, like the jackets or, flash cars, multiple mansions. I've always been just above the breadline. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but maybe that's why I deconstructed. It didn't work.
Yeah.
But I think generally the reason I deconstructed is I traveled around the world and I spoke to people and I met people, and you cannot spend time with people all over the world in Christianity without realizing there's a very diverse experience of Christianity. And so, yes, I was chatting with people who were telling me it was the best thing ever and it was wonderful and it worked. For myself, there was complexities in that, and it wasn't working all the time. It didn't work out for me in every way. There was lots of questions. And then you're talking to people who come up to you at the end for prayer or something after you've done your message, and they go, this guy's never coming back after that message, right? There's no way they're asking back. So they're like, hey, I actually don't want prayer. Can I ask you, do you really think, and fill in the blank, yeah. Or I'm staying on people's couches and in people's homes and we're staying up to 2 a.m. and they're like, this guy, probably never going to see him again. Safe person to ask. We can't ask our pastor because we were kicked out of the church, but do you really think there's a hell? Or do you really think God does this? Or do you really think God hates my niece who's gay, or whatever it might be? And bit by bit, you start to go, oh, I'm not the only one that's sitting harboring all these questions. And so I got on my own journey, and I don't go into where I am now because of the work I do. I feel it's really important that I don't specifically talk about my journey. I'm sitting making space for people to figure out what they believe. Yeah. And I don't really like being in that position of being very open about what I believe about that. I try and make a kind of neutral space for that. So yeah, I've gone on a very kind of convoluted journey on my own, but largely it was walking with people that led me to my deconstruction fully, was seeing, people around me are doing this. There's a lot of people. And the reason I'm in this space now of helping people and making space for people and walking alongside people, I've been doing that for about 12, 13 years now, is because I looked around and I was like, no one is chatting. I mean, they're asking me what I think about this. I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, gosh, there's no one. If you're in the church and you go, oh, what does God believe about tithing? I guarantee 13 white guys that have graying hair will jump on you and tell you what God thinks about tithing, or what does God think about women. They'll all tell you as well, all these men. But if someone goes, oh, I'm thinking of these, I've got these questions, I don't know what to ask, you can't ask those things. You'll get kicked out. You'll get ostracized. You can't even ask your partner sometimes without losing your marriage or whatever it might be. So who do those people turn to? And that was, for me, 15 years ago, that was a much bigger question, I think, as well, than it is now, where there's a lot more conversation around this. It was still happening then. It was a big thing, and there was lots of people helping, but it was maybe less visible back then.
Yeah.
Convoluted, rambling story of how I got here. Sorry.
I'm curious, were you, as people are asking you questions, was that what kind of prompted your own questioning, or were you kind of already in that process already?
I was very much in that process. So even when I was in a position of pastoring and when I was in a position of, I wrote curriculum for this very, very large religious organization, I constantly was kind of semi-sabotaging the whole thing by like, can we change the wording here so that they still think it's true, but also if people don't believe that, they have a lot of wiggle room here now that we changed that wording.
Yeah.
I was constantly doing things because I had all these questions from, I don't really believe what this group believe. And there was very much an encouragement for me to go out on my own because of that. But I've always been quite anti-establishment. I don't like a lot of things that are kind of normative within Christianity. Despite being very passionate about it in my early years and fundamental about it, there's lots of things that didn't really work for me. So I've always kind of butted heads with a lot of people and questioned, I'm autistic. That's not being neurodiverse, and especially being autistic, means that you are primed to go into the fundamentalism of Christianity. But it also means you're primed to not last there forever, because you are there to look at the black and white and go, I'm in, this makes sense. It's really simple. There's rules to follow. This is how it works. But you're also the first person to go, but it doesn't work. And so you're kind of both and, which leads to a lot of pain and suffering and trauma and all sorts of different stuff in there. But I kind of experienced that very much, of being in there and constantly asking, is no one seeing this? Also, maybe the social dynamic of me just asking the question when no one else, everyone else read the room and went, we probably shouldn't say that. So lots of. I don't even know if I answered your question there, but I think in some ways, because of that, I was traveling and speaking for 2-3 years. I was writing blogs and my podcast, and it was all kind of towing that line, but it was also kind of like quite subversive. And I think in a lot of ways, I signaled to people that I was safe to come and ask questions and to tell me a bit about their stories. But yes, in doing that and conversing, and still today, I talk with people that are deconstructing, and I'm going, oh, wow. I've got to say, after 15 years, it's rare I come across something completely unique that doesn't somehow interweave with the medley that is what deconstruction can look like. But even still to this day, people bring up something, and I'm like, oh, yeah, wow. Or even working therapeutically with someone, you work with someone, I'm sure you guys both notice that you're working with someone and they're talking about some sort of thing that happened in a shot, and you're like, fuck, I'm going to have to say that's a supervision. That's, that one, okay, that's going to be the next couple of years of therapy. I thought we've gone there, but no, that is me. It still happens, of course. And so, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's so common. I love that you said, it's essentially like working with people is what kind of was that doorway, the quote unquote slippery slope into asking the questions and doing that. That very much, mine wasn't necessarily in a pastoral role, because I'm a woman, can't do that. But my first few jobs with therapy clients, it was the same thing of looking at the relationships I had with humans and going, I don't know that I can make this work anymore. So I find that to be fascinating that you experienced it too in a different context.
Yeah. It's so interesting too, because the way that folks were opening up to you and viewed you as being a safe person was because you were traveling around. And had you been a permanent fixture at their local church, that probably would not have happened, it sounds like. It's just, I don't know, it's just so fascinating to think about that, like it opened up doors for you to see so many of these different diverse experiences that, who knows? I mean, like they felt safe telling you, but would they have told their pastor, their associate pastor, even a lay leadership member? Like, I don't know. Very likely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know that I first came into contact with you, six or so years ago on the interwebs. You were one of the first people that were providing resources for folks who were deconstructing their faith. So I'm just curious to know a little bit about what inspired that, some of the things that you created and what you're doing now. And I know we'll come back to it and give everybody all the websites and the, social media handles, but yeah, talk about that process. process? Because you've been, like you said, you've been doing this work for a long time in the deconstruction space.
Yeah. So, I mean, the stuff that I created because people were asking for it, or people were asking for something else. And I'm looking at these different questions I'm getting and I'm going, these all connect here. If I can find something that works with this, we can solve some problems. And so simple things like for years, I had an open DM on Instagram and before that on Facebook, and I would field hundreds of conversations a day. And I just worked 8 to 10 hours a day just chatting with people and just bouncing from conversation to conversation, just saying, because people, that's what they needed. They didn't feel safe to post openly online. They didn't have anyone in their life to talk to. They couldn't afford therapy, or worse, they thought therapy was scary and evil because it'd been demonized or whatever. They had no one to talk to. And I'm like, great, I'll talk to people all day. I can do that. And the conversations that you see that are overlapping when you're talking to literally hundreds of people a week is astonishing. And you have people going, no, you don't get it. I'm in the South. I'm in, I don't know, Houston. There's no one deconstructing Houston. I'm like, mate, first of all, Houston's huge. I've talked to like 4 people this week from Houston. I can't remember who they are. And there's no way I would break any kind of ethical boundary of like just introducing you one another to each other straight away. But I'm like, there's a lot of people in Houston. And then people like, oh no, I'm on my own. And even small cities, I'm like, I've heard that city name before. Interesting. Because I just talked to thousands of people in the course of a year. And a lot of people you're talking to again and again over, a couple of weeks here and there or whatever. But on the whole, most of the people chat just once or twice here and there. And so you're going through tons of conversations. And so like one of the first things I put together was like, what if we could just get a big map where people could like kind of anonymize themselves to some degree, but they could just stick a pin on a map and go, I'm in Austin, I'm in New York, I'm in wherever, London. And then you could just click that name and send them a message. Now, they've not given you their name. They've not given you their phone number. You don't know where they are. It's just a city, LA, something like that, Atlanta. They aren't finding you. And you could just talk a little bit online. I'm not going to police it. Yeah, sure, maybe a pastor could jump on and try and convert people or whatever, and I'll ban them somehow. I'll figure out that. And it was very much, I'll figure everything out as we need to. And I've still not really had to build that system. You can report people, and I've never had someone really reported over that. But yeah, bit by bit, I thought, I'll just build that and see how it works. And I kind of pieced together, I don't know how to do web design, and we threw it together and put it online. And before I know it, was 6,000-7,000 people on there. And yeah, people I get messages from people like, oh, I just got married to someone I met on the Deconstruction. It's called the Deconstruction Network. Just got married to someone I met. We're both in Chile, and we lived 50 miles away. And I'm like, Chile? I'm like, there's no way people are on there. Because I'm like, most people that are on there come via me or via podcasts that I've been on where I've told people, or other people in this space have gone, oh, you should check out Phil's thing or whatever. It's not my thing, it's our thing. But most are English speaking. And so as soon as it's some other country that doesn't primarily speak English, I'm always like, wow, that's incredible. But constantly people meeting in different locations. So that was a big one of just let's just help people connect. And I think more than anything, the thing that I was seeing in conversations is people want someone to talk to. They want someone safe. They want someone to just get it. And that isn't going to be first and foremost safe if it's in your immediate space. But it needs to be in a relatively geo location. You want it within 50 miles or something so you can drive there and cry over each other's shoulders and drown your sorrows over a beer or whatever. But it's just not the same online. There was a lot of online spaces. There's a lot of Facebook groups and things like that. And they were life-saving. I know I have a Discord group, and that people lives were changed just having a bit of a space to talk with and go, what about this? Or my mom just said that, or it's not the same. It's not the same as seeing people in person. And so that was just a real need that I kept seeing again and again and again. So that's been quite significant. And from that, I've got a friend who heads up a research company here in the UK. And he was like, mate, you've got a huge database of people that are in a very small niche that everyone's constantly misrepresenting, because if the papers ever want to write something about deconstruction, they ask a pastor of a mega church. And I'm like, well, that sounds like a good idea, right? What does John Piper think about deconstruction? That's what, deconstruction is just people becoming atheists. And it's like, oh God, that's painful, because I talk to so many people every day, and gosh, a tiny percentage of them are atheists, actually. Well, that's just misrepresent. And I'm like, wait, I have this kind of base that I can go, can I ask people questions? You just volunteer to answer questions, and we can over time look at how does people's deconstruction emerge? Do people all end up drifting into a certain view? Do everyone feel like it was a choice? Do people think it wasn't a choice? Do people tend to do this in younger years or older years? And we can look at a lot of this stuff. And so that came out of this, and I've been doing research on and off for a while. I'm actually a bit on a hiatus right now. I mostly just work kind of through kind of therapeutic coaching right now, because I'm training to be a qualified therapist here in the UK. I also just had a kid 2 years ago, and I kind of look after him about half the time. And I'm autistic. I don't know if I mentioned that, but being autistic and having a kid, don't recommend it. Bloody hard work, especially if you're training to be a therapist and you're then having to do placements and get hours and you're trying to work. I'm just like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Have a kid at a different point. And don't be doing neurodiversion. I'm kind of joking, but God, the noise. It's just a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's lots of things that we've been doing, and generally my online space, I do chat with people on DM still a bit, but I try and kind of do that a little bit less, just practically time-wise, and I try and make more space for open conversation. So again, I'm kind of taking a bit of a hiatus right now, but what I was doing was every day I'd post a question on Instagram and just say, I don't know, like, what do you grieve about Christianity? What do you actually miss? You know, or not Christianity, but like just being a part of conventional Christianity. A lot of people are still obviously Christian. Things like that, you know. What do you wish you could, if you could, your parents could actually hear you and listen and actually take it on? What do you wish you could actually say to them and they would actually get? And the conversations that come from that are 10 times better than me posting a post where I go, here's the things that, you know, people really grieve when they're Christian. And I might be post something afterwards, kind of summarizing some of the comments to help people kind of synthesize that. But people in this space are the resource that we need, really. It's not me telling you what I think or whatever. That's kind of generally, apart from the data, I can maybe give you a bit more insight than a lot of people have. On the whole, people can tell you what it's like, and that's what needs to be elevated. And I mean, that's a good part of what you guys are doing in a lot of ways. I know it's not specifically deconstruction, but you're elevating those stories of what can it look like.
You know, on that note, I'm curious, the classic question now, when folks do ask you, like, well, what is deconstruction? Because there is so much misinformation. There is so many different opinions out there. And what do you say? How do you define it when somebody asks you, whether it be in DMs or in person, like, well, what is deconstruction?
Yeah, I have like a little snippet that, I mean, it comes from our first study we did. And so we looked across, we got a sample of conventionally content Christians that identify as Christian across a whole spectrum of like mainline and evangelical and all sorts of stuff. And we asked them the same sort of questions that we did with our deconstruction group. And what came out of a myriad of questions. So again, we worked with a research company to kind of get it just right. I'm not historically a researcher, okay? So don't ask me methodologies and ask me to design things or anything. That's all kind of something that I get a lot of help with. But we asked them all these different questions, and we came down to, there was 3 kind of main markers that distinguish people that identify as a deconstructing Christian, and we work with people at deconstructing within that space. That when we're talking about deconstruction, we're not talking about the philosophy of deconstruction. We're not talking about home renovation. We are talking specifically about people that go, I'm deconstructing, and they're talking about, I'm coming out of a fundamental way of approaching Christianity, and I'm questioning that, and I'm coming in the other way. And what we found was there were 3 markers. The first one was that they were questioning core values of their faith of origin. Now, that was really interesting because plenty of people in our control group that were conventionally happy and content in Christianity also said that they were questioning less, but they also had that in there. It wasn't that people that are within the church and content don't question their core values sometimes. And an important one to define as well is core values. And I always kind of laugh about that because, like, there's a whole spectrum of what we might think core values are. And I always kind of just boil it down to, imagine telling your pastor, I'm questioning, fill in the blank. What do you need to fill in the blank with to make you start sweating profusely and your butthole pucker, right? I mean, that's your core values that you can't question, right? What would get you in serious trouble? What would cause your spouse to go, I might leave. I don't know if we can do this. You know, those questions, Those are your core values. Those are, is Jesus really the Son of God? Did he really die? Did he really raise from the dead? I don't know. Is God really 3 in 1? But then for other denominations, God is just a singular being. Whatever it might be, it's going to be different based on your faith of origin. So that's why we kind of categorize that as more as the core values of your faith of origin. But the second part is where the groups massively diverge. And the second part is that you then fail to find answers in your faith of origin. And so it's not that you don't find answers. You might not. But it's certainly that your faith of origin is no longer providing answers. And it could be, if I asked that same question a year ago, I got the same answer and it was fine. It worked. But now you give me the answer and I go, it's kind of bullshit. I don't see that logic. So something has changed generally in the person, but the faith of origin no longer can satisfy those questions. And then the third part, which really diverged between the two people, but was massively present. I think it was in like 96% of our population of people that identify as deconstructing, is that people are moving away from a fundamental approach to the way they see things. And so they're starting to see things less in black and white and more in nuanced gray. And that was massively present as well. And so generally speaking, I let people define deconstruction for themselves. If you identify as deconstructing, if you find meaning in this movement and identity here, and it's helpful for you to call yourself deconstructing, don't worry about my classifications. But the data shows that people that are questioning their core values, not finding them in the faith of origin, and becoming less and less fundamental as time goes on, and that generally grows as time goes on, you're more than likely deconstructing, whether you identify or not. But yeah, sorry, it's a really long answer, but I'm trying to kind of really categorize, because that's probably the main answer I can give you that really probably is maybe more helpful than most people's.
Yeah, that's a very helpful answer. I mean, I appreciate the precision and thoroughness of that. Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah, because I think that so many of us struggle to figure out what is deconstructing, and we'll use analogies and things like that, and they're helpful, of course. But I know that you said this is such a big, complex answer, and yes, it is. And also, I'm like, no, those 3 pillars that you're talking about put a lot of kind of structure around it. There's some family members I have that I go, I would say they're deconstructing, even if they wouldn't use that formal language. But then if I were to show them these 3 things, they would be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely deconstructing for sure. It's just really helpful.
Yeah. And you'll also find people within fundamental faiths will go, well, I deconstructed when I'm younger, or, that's just a phase. I've already deconstructed. But when you start to look at it, they're saying, I questioned the core values of my Christianity, or I questioned something else. But what they fail to do in those next 2 boxes is they found the answer within their faith of origin, not failing to find it. And not only that, they went right back to being fundamental. In fact, generally speaking, people that say, I deconstructed, generally have become more fundamental. And those people can frequently become non-Christian. They can come out of Christianity, but still really fail to fully have embraced kind of a deconstruction, in that they now are very fundamental about something else. And so there's quite interesting nuance within that as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I feel like there's about 25 questions that come to mind, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll keep going because we're using some language that's relatively new, right? I mean, the concept of deconstruction has been around for a long time, but we haven't used it necessarily in a formal way with religion for except for the last 5-10 years or so. And then there's also this term of deconversion or deconverting. What would you say is the difference between deconstruction and deconversion?
Yeah. So the really fascinating thing here is they're conflated all the time. Like I said, you ask a big megachurch pastor, can you give us a quote on deconstruction? What is deconstruction? They'll be, it's just people that don't care about God anymore. They've given up. They're all atheists or they're whatever. And what we know from the data is that's just not true. And even over time, these categories are fairly consistent. So someone that's deconstructing for about 2 years, if we grab 100 people that have been deconstructed for 2 years and then 100 people that have been deconstructed for 10 years, these percentages are going to be very similar. They're not actually going to have changed that much, which is really interesting to me. There's an element there as well of the longer you're deconstructing, the less you're going to hold to that label as well. So people that are holding on to that might skew slightly more towards Christian. Nonetheless, about 25 to 30%, depending on the country, will still be Christian. So deconversion means you have converted, where conversion means you come into a faith, deconversion means you go out of a faith. So that just means people that have become something other than Christian. So just by the fact that about 25 to 30% of people that deconstruct are still Christian identifies that there might be overlap here. There's a lot of people that aren't Christian anymore. So yeah, a lot of them have deconverted, but a huge portion haven't. And so this is the problem where it's not inaccurate to point to someone and go, oh, they deconverted if they're deconstructing. A lot of the time that'll be true, but it might not be. And you can't say that one way or another. Another category that's often conflated as well is dechurched. So that's been thrown around a lot. And dechurched just means I don't go to church. But again, the categories for attendance at church, at least weekly, about 16 to 70% of people go to church at least weekly still. And so, yeah, not all those people that still identify as Christian apparently go to church all that often, only about half of them. But infrequently, about a third go infrequently. So once you go a third and 16%, you're about half of the population are still going to church here and there. It's only about 50, I think it's about 51% globally on average, 51% never attend church. And so the dechurched, again, it's big overlap. You've got about half chance of pointing at someone deconstructing and go, they're dechurched. And you're like, hey, 50-50 to be right. But you also are 50-50 to be completely wrong. And it's the same with that deconversion sentiment, except you're even worse odds. You're only a 1 in 3 chance of getting it about right, maybe even a 1 in 4 chance of getting it right. And so the overlaps there exist, but deconversion is something specifically in and of its own category, in that plenty of people still are identifying with this. And actually, even that element of, you look at how many people identify as Christian between 25 and 30, a ton of people categorize themselves as spiritual but not religious. A ton of people go, I'm agnostic, I'm not sure. But when you drill down within those categories and go, do you still believe in Jesus? Yeah, a good portion of them go, yeah, well, actually, I kind of do believe Jesus and kind of do believe in that. Or do you believe in God and something? Yeah, so I said I'm agnostic, but yeah, because I don't know, but kind of believe in God. I still pray every now and again, or I still feel like there's a God there. I just want to figure out kind of what that looks like. And so there's a lot of gray in here, which again, because I have deconstructed, you're going to find me in the grays, right? This is where we end up being a lot of the time with the weeds. And so it's fascinating to me. It's just fascinating to me. You ask the average American, do you believe in heaven? 71% say yes. Like, that's a ludicrous fact, given that 71% of Americans don't identify in a way that they should believe in heaven. And so this is really fascinating aspects of people believe things whilst not ascribing to things, and people don't believe things while ascribing to things. So there's a real complexity as to how do we categorize ourselves? How do we view ourselves? And then we have people trying to categorize huge swaths of us, right? Millions of us going, oh, there's a bunch of 3-4 million people in the last few years say they deconstructed. Right, what is that? Let's try and categorize that. And you go, all right, cool. What do they believe? Well, the problem is we don't believe something. Yeah. Deconstructing isn't a belief. Deconstructing is moving away from a way of believing. And I think that's a really hard thing to categorize and to capture, because when we think of religion, when we think of spirituality, our first question is, well, what do they believe? We need to, that's how we identify a Muslim, that's how we identify a Christian, that's how we identify an atheist. In a way, to not believe something is a belief on some level. It's, it's like, it's an opposite, but like you can go, oh, I do not believe in God, or I'm pretty confident there's not enough evidence for me to believe in God, or whatever it might be, but it's still there as a level of beliefs. Deconstructing isn't that, because some people believe in God, some people don't. Some people believe in this, some people don't. It's a very, very messy category. Sorry, you're getting the idea that your big pile of questions is probably not going to get through because I just rambled.
I love this.
Yeah.
I do have another question relating to all, because everything that you're talking about, like also I hear less so lately, but for some time I heard a lot of folks asking about the term to like reconstruct, like, deconstruct, but make sure that you reconstruct. Now that was oftentimes Christians saying that, but that word, I'm just curious, what do you think, or what does it mean to you when you hear that word? Does it have any meaning or value to you, or is it just something that's kind of come in out of left field?
So I personally don't particularly like the phrase. I think it has a lot of meaning to a lot of people. And I think we should never take people's meaning away from them in a world that, God damn it, do we need some meaning to kind of anchor us? And so I think some people, that's really helpful. It's really useful language. It gives them a way of seeing their journey and framing their journey. And so I'm not for removing that language from anyone. However, I do think, broadly speaking, the language has been used as a fairly abusive kind of platform. And it's generally used, if you look at it, by people that are very powerful within spiritual and religious contexts, and they're not giving you an open space to kind of explore. They're closing down the space to define and refine. Even the way you framed it, it's all right if you deconstruct, but you make sure you reconstruct. And there's, okay, but what does that mean to you, my friend? Oh, you mean make sure you believe in this, this, and this, and this. It says almost in and of itself, the idea of reconstructing suggests there is something to construct. If you go back to kind of like a simple idea of deconstructing, of taking down a house, the idea is, well, yeah, but make sure you build a new house. What if I want to live in a tree? What if I want to live in a cave? What if I want to just roam around for a while and go Airbnb to Airbnb? I don't want to build a house. That would be really unhelpful for me, hugely unhelpful. But their way of seeing things is, we live in houses. That's how we operate. So you took a house down, and that's okay. Maybe it had bad foundations. Just make sure you build a house properly again. And ideally one that I like and it looks like mine, because I'm fragile. And what I find, generally speaking, 9 times out of 10 people that are talking about reconstruction are still really unsure of what they believe, and they just are desperately trying to get people to agree with what they currently believe so that they can feel a bit more secure, in my experience. And that's maybe me just viewing that from a little bit afar. I've got closer to some people and further away from other people, but a lot of time it feels like a bit of a desperate defense of kind of like trying to calm the cognitive dissonance and the terror that is, well, I've deconstructed so much, but I've found that's really terrifying to be so unstable, and I need stability, and I can kind of believe this, and if I can convince other people to believe it, well, then it must be right. So I don't tend to find it be a very helpful term. And the thing is as well, if it was all black non-binary people and women telling me to reconstruct, I'd probably have a much bigger ear for that word and go, okay, let's listen up. But the fact it's all white men that were generally pastors before, I'm like, oh, you just want to be a pastor again and tell me what to believe this time, in my experience.
Yeah.
There's some white women in there as well, and there's some people of color in there as well doing that. But that pattern of, they were in leadership, they're now being in a new leadership, that whole thing just feels very rinse repeat to me. So it's helpful for some people, but I think on the whole, I try and avoid. I always just say, if someone uses that word, just have caution as you approach it and ask the question: are they giving you choice to believe whatever you want? If I come out and go, yes, I've reconstructed, I'm now a Muslim, would they be comfortable? Would they be happy? Or I go, I'm now a Satanist, I'm an atheist. Would they be happy? And if the answer is no, generally speaking, you want to work with people that would be happy whatever works for you. That's who you want to work with when you're deconstructing. And if that's not who they are, just take a little step back. Because it's all about you having autonomy and figuring it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it goes with that kind of the third pillar that you were talking about of, kind of moving away from that fundamental approach of thinking and living. And the idea of reconstruction to a specific end goal is still in that fundamentalist camp very much, which is interesting because, you've kind of mentioned this a little bit already. We see this maybe trend within pastors and leaders who are maybe still a part of big churches and Christian faiths that are now kind of jumping onto this, quote unquote, deconstruction train where they're talking about it. Yeah. Go deconstruct. Of course, they're also saying, make sure you reconstruct. But
do it in our home group for deconstruction.
Right.
With Pastor Jeff. Yeah.
Yes. Here's how you do it. Here's the steps, and here's about how long it takes. This is where you end up. But why do you think that is that so many, religious leaders and pastors are like promoting it, but also with their parameters around it?
You can control it. You can control it, right? I mean, if I tell you, if you know that the fastest growing spiritual movement, if we categorize people that are deconstructing and shifting in a direction spiritually, which is similar to shifting in a direction spiritually of becoming a Christian or becoming a Muslim, if you use it in that context of a movement of spirituality, deconstruction, that is to move away from some sort of faith of origin and reinvent what you believe, is the fastest growing spiritual movement in the West, period. And it has been for about 15 years. It's massive. And so when I traveled and went around, I had loads of people asking questions, but the most interesting questions I got were from pastors going, how the hell do I stop people leaving? They weren't even asking, how do I get people to join anymore? Pastors have not asked, how do we get people saved for 20 years, in my opinion, when I talk to pastors. What they're asking is, how do we stop people leaving? Right? I mean, that's the big question. But they're not even on, how do we grow? They're just going, how do we stop shrinking mode? That's where they're going. And so when that is fueling you and consuming you, everything you see, all the data goes, guys, 2070 in America, and gosh, it's already there in most of Europe, 2070, it's not even going to be a Christian nation, never mind my church doing well. And not only that, there's going to be no small churches. It will all just be mega churches. The rate we're going, we're just shifting away from small church to big church. So when you're viewing the world like that, you're going, how do we control this? Well, the key is you recognize people are going to probably deconstruct. What if we do it for them? What if we get them to deconstruct first? We can control that. We can make sure they've asked questions, but they answer it the right way. And I don't think there's anything malicious in this. 9 times out of 10. This is just people trying to figure out how to save the church, how to serve God, how to whatever. We've been in these places. All three of us have been in this mindset to some degree at some point. And we weren't particularly, I guess at times maybe we were, but most of the time we were just genuinely doing what we thought was right, what we thought was good, what we thought would serve God, what we thought God wanted us to do, what we thought would help people. These are the motivators more often than not. The systemic things that are really dark and devious there. And there's certainly people in there that are terrible people, but they're just trying to figure it out. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you stop and think about it. You go, yeah, I'll figure out how to help you think you've deconstructed. And why would you go and deconstruct now? You'll hear deconstruction and go, well, I've done that. Nothing to look at here. And so I think it makes a lot of sense, but I have a different view. Most people in this space seem to get really pissed off and upset about it. And I kind of laugh, like every time someone brings out a new bit, the Gospel Coalition brings out a book telling you what they think of deconstruction. Everyone's going crazy and like, oh, they're misrepresenting us. Oh, they said this and that's not true. And oh, they said this about that person and that's really unfair. And I'm like, yeah, like, of course. Also, when I let go of the ball in midair, it goes down. Like, that's what we're talking about here. We're getting upset that gravity pulls things down. We're getting upset that, I don't know, there's night and day. Like, there's always going to be night and day. Gravity's always going to pull down. And the Gospel Coalition are only ever going to say something negative about deconstruction, right? I mean, it's just, you're not going to get a different... What were you expecting this book to read like? And so I feel it's fascinating to me. So when you look at their audience, they have 3 people in their audience, right? They've got the person that's in their pew that's going to nod their head and hates deconstruction and is not going to deconstruct anytime soon, bar some significant impact in their life. Nothing changes. They're already there. They read the book. It's a bit of like self-masturbation, kind of like that whole mutual we're right, whatever. Nothing changes. We read it and we get upset, or we just go, well, of course the Gospel Coalition or Gospel Coalition, what else would they do? Nothing changes, right? Nothing. We're not sold and go, Jesus, they're right. We better get back into really fundamental Christianity. I'm going to become a Calvinist. I'm going to become a Seventh-day Adventist. That's not going to happen, right? You don't tend to, once you're moving away from fundamentalism, you tend not to turn around and go right back. And the third category, and this is where I'm really excited about these books. I love it. I could not wait for them to write more. I hope they get more podcasts out. I really do. Because only their people are listening. And maybe a few of us listening to make a funny podcast where we listen alongside and we make jokes. Because that's good content, right? We love it. The third category is who really matters. The person that's sitting in their pews going, I just don't know if my son is going to go to hell because he's gay. And I don't know if I can kick him out of the house. And I just don't get it. What the hell is God like? I thought he was good. And now I actually have a gay son. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what to do. Or the person that's sitting there going, I've got a Muslim friend at work and it's really messing with my head because he's just as nice as me and I like him and he's great. And you know who they can talk to? No one. You know who they can talk about these questions with? Do you know who they can just explore and think about? No one. Do you know what language they have for that? Nothing. Yeah, they can type into Google, like, does God really send Muslims to hell? Or like, but again, they're only going to get a bunch of Gospel Coalition answers or Got Answers or whatever weird websites somehow game the SEO so well. You gotta give it off. Like, I mean, hats off to their SEO game. Like, we need to get on it on the Deconstruction camp. But what they just got was a term to type into Google. What they just got was a hashtag to put in Instagram. What they just got, flipping heck, the book written by, I've been a bit out of the game for the last year, I've not been paying attention, but the last one that came across my page, I did an interview with Alicia Childers, I don't know. Her publisher told her, you have no data, you're just making shit up. Like, her publisher said, I mean, that's amazing. Because I'm pretty sure it's a Christian publisher. You have to talk to someone that actually has data. So they put in contact with me and I talked to her, and I don't think any of my data, I've not read the book, I don't know, but I don't think any of my data got in there. So she didn't like it. But her book,
that's amazing.
Just fascinating, isn't it? But her book, that week after her book launched, every person I know in this space was inundated with new people going, hey, I'm deconstructing, and I read it. Because she listed us all. She listed everyone. Not everyone, and there's a few of us going, man, why did I make it in the book of how evil everyone is? I wanted to get a spot there, because we're all like, that's a great Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
But that's a Hall of Fame. And you know who was showing up in our inbox? Yeah, maybe some of the people we usually talk to going, oh, fucking, I'm so angry, she's misrepresenting us, maybe. And maybe a few extra pastors are showing up going, oh, I've just found out about you and you're awful and I'm going to start trolling you and angry and trying to have an argument. But not many of those people. Who was actually showing up going, I want help. People that had never heard of this before. And so basically it's free advertising. So I love like that they're trying to co-op. I love because it's backfiring for them so badly. Sorry, it's a real big ramble, but I just think there's different ways to frame these things. And I think first and foremost, we have to take a step back and go, who was I a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years, whatever it was? Who was I and how would I be talking about deconstruction if I was worried my kids would deconstruct? If I was worried my partner would deconstruct and leave me, would I go, oh, yeah, let's deconstruct together. Let's get some books and try and figure out what this is and do it right, and then we'll get stronger faiths. Like, yeah, I probably would do that. I really probably would have. So of course they're doing it. Of course. Like, why are we expecting anything else? Why would we expect, I don't know, water to flow upstream? It's going to go downstream. That's what's going to happen. I feel like it's a lot because I've got a toddler, and the amount of times I get myself so upset, and then I have to take a stop and I just take a moment and go, what else would a toddler do? You know, he just pushed water that I left on a coffee table off the coffee table. There's water all over the floor, and I'm going, I want to be frustrated with him. And I'm like, wait, no. What else would a toddler have done if you put water on a coffee table? What could I have done differently? A lot. I knew better than this. It's all on me here. And again, what else would a pastor do? What else would my grandma do? And I think this is helpful when we're interacting with individuals as well, family, whatever. It's going, well, what else could they do right now? They're terrified. They're wanting to change us. They're wanting to fix this. They're wanting to save us. I would have done the same. I probably did do the same every time I heard of someone that left the church.
I've noticed that too. I've as far as the backfiring bit, I mean, I've lost count of how many people have reached out to me in DM saying, I found you, and I found the term, and I found the hashtag, and I found all these other folks because John Cooper declared war on deconstruction, or because of this book, The Deconstructing Christianity, or whatever, the one that you just referenced. I forgot the title. That's not important, but it's it's like folks are finding out that they're not alone in this. I mean, that was my experience 4 years ago, not from a book, but just finding the hashtag. And that, actually, come to think of it, was from an article. I forgot who published it, but it was critical of John Steingard when he left. And it was, you know, Christian rocker says he no longer believes in God was the headline. I'm like, oh, and found the hashtags, and here I am 4 years later. But I'm curious. That also leads into a question. I've seen a lot of folks on both extremes. So I've seen folks in the deconstruction camp, say, for example, somebody is maybe still holding on to a belief in God, and they might remark, you haven't deconstructed enough, for instance. Or on the other side of it, I have literally seen a pastor say, deconstructing is fine so long as you do it at the foot of the cross, for instance. All of that to say, because those are both, they, you know, are giving lip service to deconstruction, but are very rigid in what that needs to look like. I hear you saying the opposite, like it's much more nuanced, there's much more flexibility. That said, are there any specific things that need to be deconstructed, or what does that look like? I mean, how would you answer that question?
I would say, what else would a toddler do? Right? I would literally look at it and go, well, what else would you possibly deconstruct if you don't have a question? You would deconstruct what you question next. And as people ask me, I think I'm going to deconstruct. Where do I start? And I'm like, it sounds like you're not going to deconstruct. Like, go home, be happy, have a really toxic faith, in my opinion, or whatever, you know. But like, if you don't actually have questions right now, you're not going to get any deconstruction. It's not going to click for you. It's not going to happen. Follow your question. Or where do I start deconstructing? I'm asking a few questions, but is there an order to do it? Or which book should I read first? I'm like, well, what question? What, you know, some people come in going, I'm questioning, how could God be real when all his followers are voting for Trump? How could God be real when my church is being really anti all lives matter and anti, you know, like Black Lives Matter and things like that? And it's like, oh, so you're coming in from racism and you want to look at, what does God think about race? You're not even questioning God necessarily. You're questioning, what does God think about race? And is my faith somehow racist? And what do I think about that? And what's the origins of this? And, you know, whereas other people are going, well, I don't know if I believe in God. I've been praying for like 30 years. And honestly, I'm not getting many good answers. My life is shit, or whatever it might be. And you go, okay, cool. You're starting to question, like, is there a God, or why do prayer not work? And so for me, and people will say like, well, you've not deconstructed if you've not decolonized. And I'm like, you're not going to decolonize until you start questioning that. And fuck, would I like you to decolonize? Jesus, oh God, please, please, please look at that. But I cannot make you look at that, right? You just aren't until you look at it and go, this isn't adding up. I need to start asking why. And so it really boils back down to people will do what they have to do right now. In the same way that I couldn't have got you to deconstruct 5 years ago, why would you think on any level that you can get that person that has deconstructed to deconstruct this specific thing when it's still serving them, it's still working for them? And so that's why, you know, you'll have people going, well, they've not deconstructed enough, they're still Christian. And I'm like, yeah, you still question some of those things. They don't. They question. They probably did start looking and go, oh, like, well, what does this mean for this? And they go, oh, it still adds up to me. It still makes sense. It's still okay. It's okay. So it's not going to get deconstructed until it's not okay. And maybe that will happen, and maybe it won't. And I think on some level, I think there's elements of nuancing out the component of what causes harm to others, what causes harm to yourself. And again, dear God, that's a complex, grey, messy mix of things, because most things cause harm to others ultimately. And so, yes, I think we should be going, can we try and nudge people along on being less transphobic because there's kids killing themselves in churches here? Can we nudge them along to at least going, well, maybe even though I'm not so sure, I've got questions about homosexuality because I don't know a single gay person, it's not affecting my life right now. And as soon as their cousin comes out, or their kid comes out, or their partner comes out, they're going to have some questions, right? But until that happens, they're causing harm. They're part of a system that causes harm. Can they, as someone that is questioning and moving along, are they more susceptible to being nudged? Are they more susceptible to at least seeing how it impacts other people? I hope maybe there's an increased openness with less fundamentalism, that we can nudge people in a way that looks at things that maybe are more harmful than not. But I certainly think things that are core to their identity, and a lot of these people, probably it's not that core to their identity to actively think homosexuality is wrong. People that are deconstructing, I'm saying. They might still not have really looked at it because it's not affecting them. But maybe that would be something that it would be open to looking at and questioning. Whereas if you go, well, no, we have to make them stop believing in God, I'm like, mate, there's no chance. Like, their whole existence and their way they frame their entire day-to-day life and who they think they are is wrapped in that question. Until they're really ready to go there, trust me, they're not going to go there. They have every defense in their brain is wired to protect that one. You are going to get nowhere here. And so I think it's figuring out that balance. But I think for me, if I'm going to nudge, it's going to be on what's causing harm. And also maybe what's causing harm to people other than that person themselves. Because I can look at that person and go, geez, the fact that they believe this about God, really, man, that's given them terrible self-worth and it's causing them to beat themselves up and whatever. But it's not harming other people around them explicitly. And I'm not going to change that realistically. Because as much harm as it's causing, it's also serving them. Whereas when they go, oh my gosh, they're really hurting people in their church, are actively being hurt because they believe that, because they teach that, because they're supporting that. That I might try and nudge here and there. But even then, it's a hard one. It's a hard one because I know realistically, you're probably not going to get very far. You just don't get that far at pushing people to ask questions that they don't want to ask and they're not asking already. So yeah, I don't know. I try and hold deconstruction loosely and go, your deconstruction is yours, and it will look like what you need to question.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that's even just from my own take. The way I mean, I'm relating this to my own, the type of like therapeutic and coaching work I do. There's a lot of parts work, but it's rooted in curiosity rather than coercion is like one of the ways I frame things. And yeah, if you're rooting something in coercion, it's like, it's just going to be a power struggle. You're not going to get far. It's going to create more issues. Are going to be popping up everywhere. But if you can embrace curiosity, things will really start to just unfold.
Yeah. And I think too, we're talking about fundamentalism a lot too. So if we're putting restrictions or, parameters around somebody else's deconstruction, we're just replicating those fundamentalist patterns. And we might go like, why is it so important for me to require you to do this in order to meet my definition of what it means to be deconstructed? There's a big philosophical, question that then we have to look at it ourselves to say like, would I prefer that they do? Yes. But is it, am I recreating the fundamentalist narrative to require that in order to, meet my definition? Which also then kind of lends to this idea of, and I would love to hear what you have to say, is like, I really believe that deconstruction is a lifelong process, that we're kind of always doing this untangling. But I hear people say, well, I've deconstructed, I'm done with that. Do you think there's ever an end point to deconstructing your faith, your life, your whatever? I mean, Andrew's whole handle is deconstruct everything. So like, is there an end point or is it ongoing?
I think this is where there's a term the term deconstruction that's probably loosely affiliated to what we're using and categorizing this movement with comes from Derrida's philosophy. And so postmodern philosophy that is basically, it tears apart everything. Nothing has meaning outside of being attached to other things and how they are built together and what does that look like and what does that mean. There is no such thing as a cat without you and me having a concept of not cat. And never mind cat. And then what do you see a cat to be and what do I see a cat to be and how do I see that? And I see that because of all the other things I've seen in my life and all the things I've put words to and the language I've used and the labels I've used. And so it's quite famous within philosophical circles that if you try and read like Derrida, it's really hard to get into deconstruction because, I mean, the guy's deconstructing his own essays about deconstruction. So as he's writing, it's falling apart. It's like you just seen letters dripping off a page or something. It's just awful to read. And it's also cool and awesome, but like, it's wild. But I guess this is where we're starting to go from, if you look at how I was defining how does this group identify and what are they identifying deconstruction with, it's very much about letting go of that original kind of faith, core values, letting go of those, becoming less fundamental. And I think that can lead into a way of thinking and a way of becoming less fundamental and a way of approaching the world that leads you to deconstruct everything. And I think that is a lifelong journey. And I think that's a natural progression for a lot of people. I think it's possible to identify with this process of deconstructing faith and to go, yeah, I'm done. And I actually kind of don't want to take apart my whole life. And I don't want to question what is a cat. Because really, I just like cats as they are. It's just whatever. It's a cat. I know it's not a dog. That's fine. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, I don't want to do that. But I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Can we just have a podcast on what is a cat and just sit and talk about that for 8 weeks? Like, I don't know. Maybe we could try. I'm excited about that sort of stuff. I don't know. I just want to question everything. I want to pick apart everything. I want to figure out what do I think about that. And I want to go, and I'm almost certainly going to be wrong, and I'll believe a different thing again next time I look at it. But a lot of people don't. And I think there's an element as well of just emotional labor of deconstructing something as well, where let's pick apart what a cat is. Unless you are the cat person, it's probably not that challenging to you, right? You're not going to have this existential crisis overly. When you take apart the thing that is why you got married, why you chose to have kids, why you chose that job, why you chose not to have a job, why you chose to be poor, why you chose to not go to college, why you chose to fill in the blank, go to another country and like colonize it and try and do your own version of white supremacy. You start going, Jesus Christ, I am picking that apart and I am finding my whole identity is thrown out of whack. My whole life, I'm now like full of grief over 30 years of my life gone. I could have been a fill in the blank. I could have done this. I did that. That's even worse sometimes. Not that what could I have been, but what did I actually end up doing? Oh my God, I'm so full of shame. And so the thing is, there is an element where I get it, and I actually am quite a strong advocate for if you are not someone that needs to ask questions all the time and keep questioning everything all the time, absolutely take a break. Take a break when you need to. Even in the realm of faith, if you can take a pause and be relatively content in that, make sure you do that often. Jesus Christ, it's hard. Don't just do it in one go like a lot of us did. Hands up me. Right? Because that was a brutal many years of like figuring it out. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you can transition into a way of seeing the world. And that's a beautiful way of seeing the world if you can embrace the uncertainty. And I think it postures you to embrace the uncertainty to do that. But if you need a bit of certainty, that's okay. That's fine. It moves you away from fundamentalism. It doesn't remove all fundamentalism. You can stay a little bit fundamental. You can have some black and whites in your life. That's okay. We all still have black and whites, right? I still think the glass is going to fall if you push it off the table. I'm pretty confident. I don't know. I really don't. Maybe something completely erodes and I turn out to be hallucinating and I'm actually a duck floating through space. I don't know. So maybe there's no glass on the table at all. But I'm pretty sure if I push that glass, it's going to fall over. It's okay to have that certainty. It's okay to live your life as though that's certain. That's okay. Like, I don't think we have to, but I think it's fun to, and I think it's more likely. Sure. And no pastor is questioning it, right? No fundamental pastor is going, am I a duck floating through space, hallucinating my life? What a fun thing for a duck to hallucinate, right?
So maybe
that's so great.
Perhaps the question was maybe just answered. I don't know. We'll see. But I want to ask, what is it that you wish people would know before deconstructing that, like when they begin, like either things like that you've learned along the way or just things that you've noticed that you've been helping folks, things that keep coming up. I'm just curious what comes up.
I think it's difficult. A lot of us have grown up in these environments that demonize emotion, demonizing being present, demonizing trusting yourself, all of these things. And so we are predispositioned to do this as painfully and brutally as possible in a way that I would say, gosh, if you can just sit with it and give yourself space and be compassionate towards yourself and all of these things. I could give you a list forever that you guys are nodding your heads because you go, gosh, yeah, I sit with these people every day. And I'm like, oh gosh, my heart's breaking. And you're probably also going, God, I remember when I did that as well. And God, I was such a terrible advocate for myself. I was a terrible, compassionate, kind friend to myself, helping myself deconstruct. So all these things that can help us, in some ways, we're so set not to be able to do them in a lot of ways. And so I still say them. I still say, be kind to yourself. This is really hard. This is probably the hardest thing you'll do. There's not many things in life that you are so interwoven with from the get-go, because most of us in these places when we start to deconstruct probably came in from the ground up. We were born into this stuff, or we started very early. Very few people identify as deconstructing. They tend to just deconvert. If they came in as an atheist becoming a Christian at college, and then they go, actually, nah, I don't think I believe this anymore, they just walk away because they have their family that wasn't Christian, or they have a whole world, or they have a framework of what it's like to live without faith. Most of us did not have that. We have no concept of that. We've never been outside the bubble, outside of trying to drag people into the bubble. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to have purpose. We don't know how to. You hear it now and you go, "Gosh, this is so toxic." But we don't even think it's possible to be moral. We're worried we're just going to become this sinful, crazed person. And I think you can't know that until you know it. You can't know how ludicrous that is until you look back and go, "Gosh, I cannot believe that. I just couldn't see anything else." But that's awful that I believe that way, or that held me back so much to believe that way, held me back so much to be so unkind to myself. But I was taught to be unkind to myself every day as a discipline in my quiet time. Sit there and beat myself up about how much I've screwed up and look for every way I've messed up so I can confess it, or whatever it might be. Different people have different practices. But these things really set us up in harmful ways. If you're in a space where you are privileged enough to be able to afford therapy, and you feel safe enough to approach therapy, because a lot of us have been harmed through false forms of therapy through church, Christian counseling, and all sorts of things like that. And also a lot of us have been told that therapy is dangerous, demonizing, you'll go to hell for it, whatever, because there's nothing more scary to pastors than people going to therapy because it teaches them autonomy. But if you can do something like that, do something like that. And if you can't, be a therapist yourself. Learn those lessons to be a good friend to yourself, all of that. But yeah, I think just accept that this is going to be the fucking worst. I cannot even describe to you how fucking awful it is. And yet, you'll never, ever, ever feel better than you do when you're quote unquote on the other side, if there's another side, right? So once you get on the other side of some of the bigger hurdles, I should say, once you've got a few big hurdles through and you look back and you go, oh my gosh, yeah, I actually like myself properly now. Oh my gosh, yeah, I actually have friends that I'm connecting with on a meaningful level and not that. Oh my gosh, I actually can sense what's going on in my body. I can sit with my emotions. I can do all that stuff. Oh my gosh, I know what it is to make my own decision and not go, maybe I should run that by my spiritual mother or whatever it might be, right? That's incredible. But that's not going to be tomorrow. It's probably not even going to be 6 months from now. It might not even be a few years from now. And it's going to be really fucking hard. And I say this often, don't, like I've mentioned earlier, someone comes in and goes, I think I'm going to deconstruct. It looks really interesting. I'm like, mate, turn around, walk back right now. Go back into that toxic religion, harm people, all that stuff. Yeah. But like, you don't choose to do this, right? You do not want to sign up for this. Trust me. Do it because you are dragged kicking and screaming. Wailing, no, I want to still believe in God. No, I still want to be a part of this community. No, I want to have my family like me and be able to talk to me without so much tension. So yeah, I think generally speaking, sign up for the rough ride. Know it's going to be tough, but try and be your best friend through that as well and be kind to yourself, because you beat yourself up for X amount of years. Don't keep doing it. At least embrace this new season to not be beating yourself up. But everything you advise people to do, they can't do it yet anyway. It's like, because I know this because I couldn't do it yet. Like, it's part of the journey.
Yeah. I appreciate the honesty, because it is the worst and the best all at the same time.
Absolutely. It's like having kids, right? I just had a kid. Yeah. It's the worst. I hate it. Oh, I love it. It's fantastic. Yeah. And sometimes it's much, much more worse. And other times you go, oh, okay, no, the good is actually starting to outweigh this. And that's all. You have to make space for it all. It's all real. It's all true. And you got to hold it. Don't listen to the people that are telling you to reconstruct. They probably tell you it's just a wonderful glide right through. It's another reason to start going, interesting.
Yeah. Well, this has been so helpful. The last question that we ask all of our guests is there anything else that you wish we would have asked you today?
No, because the thing is, anything you ask, I just waffled on about what I wanted to waffle on about anyway, so I probably hit what I wanted to hit.
I mean, you gave us a lot of really great food for thought. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, there's so many, like I said, so many other conversations we could have. But I think this is good, as we're talking about what is deconstruction versus what is, deconversion versus dechurched, as well as like, that's all very different than religious trauma, which we've done episodes on that before as well. And so I think to have a more robust understanding of what is deconstruction, even some of those core component pieces to it, I think is extremely helpful, and giving people just like some structure around a time that feels very unstable. So appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank
really
you.
Fun.
Well, we're curious to know, where can people find out more about you, whether that's the Deconstruction Network or your podcast or social media, are you taking clients, all that stuff. Let us know where people can get in touch with you. Okay.
So I mentioned Alicia Childers is a great no. Find out all about me in these 3 books. No. You can find me on my, I've got websites. PhilDrysdale.com is kind of like more kind of my stuff and the work that I'm doing. The Deconstruction Network, head to there. It flips in and out of functionality occasionally because I can't afford to keep it running sometimes. But generally speaking, deconstructionnetwork.com is a great place to meet other people and connect with people and take part in research and things like that as well. Instagram is generally one of the places I'm most active. Although, like I said, I'm kind of on hiatus, so don't expect much there, but you can shoot me a DM. You can get involved in conversations that are happening there. I'm just at Phil Drysdale. I'm sure I'll also be in show notes. But yeah, and yes, I'm tentatively taking clients here and there as I have availability. And so, yeah, people can connect with me there as well. And I will say, I don't want to undercut you guys, but working with someone over in the UK, a lot cheaper than the insurance-fueled world of America.
Right.
And so it just on some way circumventing that privileged world of living in the capitalist hellscape that is Earth right now. I just think, I say that again and again and again, if you can make things easier for yourself, make things easier for yourself. Absolutely. That's awesome. And so that's a big one. Not many people can access simple things that can make things easier. But yeah, it's difficult, man. Really difficult.
Well,
but yeah, so
I appreciate the work you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. And I was going to say as well, because I'm on a hiatus, but I have probably like 400 hours worth of YouTube content of interviews with people. I was thinking about our podcast, Laura, because I was thinking about how short this is for me. I'm sure your viewers are already like, all right, wrap this up, Phil. But I think ours was like 3 hours long or something, right? So there's a lot of content online. If you type my name into YouTube, you'll find a lot of videos of different people telling their stories, of different experts in different fields talking about different categories of stuff to do with deconstruction. And so, you're best getting the backlog of Phil rather than the current Phil, really, to be honest with you.
Hey, you know what though? But maybe they'll have enough on backlog until you're ready to come back, and do whatever again.
If you listen to my podcast just permanently, it'll probably cover you for about a year.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, it's good though. I love it. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a great conversation. We will have everything in the show notes so that people can get in touch with you, follow you along. But I'm excited about the work that you're doing and so grateful for everything that you have already done, because you've in this post-religion, deconstruction space, you are like the founding father.
Definitely not sure about that.
I figured you'd like that name.
I don't know. I'll take it. Yeah, but certainly not. Certainly not.
Thank you again so much to Phil Drysdale for joining us on an amazing conversation. I I really love talking to Phil. It's been a hot minute since we've gotten to chat, so I was so glad to have him on today, and he's so generous with his time and information. Such a great conversation.
Yeah. I always love talking with Phil. He was one of the first accounts I think I stumbled upon when I first found the deconstruction hashtag like 4 years ago.
Nice.
And so yeah, he's one of those.
He's the founding father.
One of those. Yeah. He's like, yeah, exactly. I mean, he's one of the original deconstruction guys, at least, I mean, in my view, just because he's one of the first ones I found. But also I always just appreciate like just his thoroughness and passion and how deeply he thinks about these things. So yeah,
I think that's
so talking to him.
It comes out so clearly, like how passionate he is about this topic. And I love the fact that he's partnered with a research company, that they have done so much great research. I had no idea that Alyssa, is it Childers or whatever her name is? I didn't know they had talked to him for his book. Now I'm like, maybe I need to go through it and, do a quote unquote book review.
Yeah. And I don't know who all she quoted, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but out of curiosity, because I think I'm even quoted once from like an Instagram post.
Look at
and
you.
But I went through, I was never interviewed. I don't know who I know who she is, but she never talked to me. But interestingly enough, I guess there's quite a few folks that she quoted but never talked to.
Interesting.
Is my understanding. And then the ones that she did talk to, she didn't necessarily actually put in a lot of what they said. She was very selective.
That makes sense.
Doesn't surprise me. Also, I mean, I get it. When you interview somebody, you're not going to put the entire literal interview in your book. I get it in her defense, but it is interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Phil deserves to be interviewed for something like that because he is that does do such great work. But now I have a new book that I need to go get and see who she mentioned. But yeah, I particularly appreciated when we asked him, how do you define deconstruction, and those three kind of tenets or pillars that he gave. I wrote them out as he was talking. Questioning your core values, or questioning the core values of your faith of origin, then failing to find answers in your faith of origin, and then moving away from a fundamental approach to the way that you see things into more of a nuanced approach, which I feel like that is such a great definition or way of looking at the phenomenon of deconstruction. It feels really thorough.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and then also just appreciated him taking the time to kind of break down not only deconstruction but deconversion as well, because of those three steps. Yeah, a lot of people do steps 1 and 2, but that step third of like having more flexibility, holding things with greater lightness. That's what sometimes doesn't happen, and that does seem to be the one thing that really sets deconstruction aside from just simply deconverting. And so I really appreciated him taking the time to really specifically break that down.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, I hope that everybody has been able to get something from this conversation. I know that I have. Make sure that you follow Phil on social media. Check out the Deconstruction Network. Like he said, it's up there. It's running. I've been on it. I don't know if you've ever been on the site, Andrew, but you can put your location in, and then all the other people that are in there, you have the opportunity to see, oh yeah, there's people within, 50 miles of me, and there's a way to connect so that you can have that face-to-face contact, which I think is so important now more than ever, especially after the election cycle. Having people that are close that you can connect with is essential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had made an account on there years ago.
Oh, nice.
Probably the year that I made my account and had forgotten. I was like, so the login credentials that I use for pretty much everything, I'm like, I wonder if I have an account. I did it. Boom. Yes, I do. In fact, still have an account on there.
Love it.
Yeah, and I zoomed in to see if there were folks in the area. I'm in rural East Tennessee, for those who don't know. And there's I don't know, a couple dozen folks over here.
That's amazing.
In this little corner of rural Tennessee. I mean, it's not a place you would, but there's folks around here. And I can only imagine how many there would be in larger cities and larger metro areas.
Yeah, That is so cool. So yeah, people go join the Deconstruction Network. Phil is great because he gives all of his, resources away for free, which is just absolutely incredible. I think there's a way to donate probably to him, so like if you have a few extra bucks, throw it his way. He's doing some great work. I'm so excited. And like we said, you can listen to his entire backlog of podcasts and, they're on YouTube, they're on wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, he is working with people right now, I think in a coaching capacity. He's training to be a therapist. So I'm excited. All right. So that's another episode of Sunday School Dropouts. And with that, all God's people said, Amen.